For long-term sustainability for the companies that will be around, what do you think for both institutional and retail investors this space presents to them over the next 12 months? Hey everyone, welcome to our latest TDR Psychedelic Exclusive. Hope you had a great week. What a week last week, obviously, with the MAPS data read and what it did for the industry, including Steve Cohen and his firm Point72 announcing 18.95 million shares purchased for Cybin late Friday afternoon, which is causing quite a buzz for the stock here today. And will we see more institutions start investing into this space? Well, let's find out as we welcome in biotechnology analyst and formerly of EF Hutton, Elemer Piros. Big following you have within this space. Good to see you, and it's great to finally have you on the podcast for the first time.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.
Appreciate it. Anthony Verrill, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well. How's it going?
Good. All right. So, analyst from New York City, you follow this industry, biotechnology, as I said. I think a lot of people, after all the news late last week, obviously MAPS with groundbreaking data towards their phase 3 trial, created a lot of buzz. We saw some mainstream attention in the New York Times. This is slowly but surely going to draw more and more attention. And we saw that 24 hours after the announcements with, as I said off the top, Steve Cohen's firm Point72 making that investment in to Cybin, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is this the first institution or first they've invested within this space? The first company within this space is Cybin. Is that correct?
First institution involved in the psychedelic space, specifically in Cybin, for the last year or two. We obviously saw a lot bigger involvement by other institutions in a Compass financing that closed about a month ago. Yeah.
When we look at institutions, pension plans, they follow the biotech industry very closely. What does this data say about what MAPS has done when it comes to overall garnering a lot of interest amongst shops, institutions on Wall Street?
I mean, can you imagine that 2.5 years ago, we had none of this?
None.
We didn't have the first phase 3 results from MAPS, and we didn't have the second, obviously. And what is so remarkable about the announcement and the comparison between the two phase 3 trials is the consistency.
Right.
Get to roughly the same level of benefit, meaning about 70% would no longer qualify for a PTSD diagnosis after 3 doses of MDMA and some psychotherapy accompanying that. So that's remarkable. 87%, 86.5% response rate. I mean, what you get normally is 55 to maybe 60% with a conventional antidepressant, with all the baggage that comes with Zoloft, Prozac, you name it.
Yeah.
I mean, do you really see this sector kind of taking stride and really starting to fill the gaps with traditional SSRIs and traditional antidepressants, or that's kind of, or are we kind of getting ahead of ourselves?
No. I mean, what just came out 2 weeks ago, a phase 2 results from the USONA Institute, which looked at psilocybin, same drug as what Compass is developing, in major depressive disorder, meaning second line, meaning you failed one SSRI, you were put on psilocybin, and you had an amazing response to that. That lasted up to 3 months. That's the current observation time, with no side effects right after the dosing, as opposed to the plethora of side effects that you see on the Zoloft prescription information.
Think about that. No side effects, none. That's you can't even put that into words. Yeah.
People can't get up to what might be a therapeutic dose with antidepressants because they suffer from the side effects and they just can't go any higher. So the drug is pretty much meaningless for them.
So what do you think, as far as we're thinking ahead, how this is still a Schedule 1 drug, MDMA, with many believing this will get fast-tracked and approved by the FDA by mid-year next year. So we follow the cannabis space too, where there's a lot of conversations amongst institutions happening right now where cannabis is still classified as a Schedule 1 drug. in order for them to fully immerse themselves within this industry, there needs to be some sort of reform. Do you see that same model taking place with the psychedelic space, or is the data just so strong that we could see them move in sooner rather than later? And a prime example of that is what Steve Cohen's firm did late last week.
Yeah. I mean, the analogy to the cannabis space in general, there is some strength to that analogy, but I would be more specific analogy to CBD, because CBD was tested, rigorously tested in at least 5 different clinical trials, approved, and within 30 days, it was descheduled by the FDA. Not CBD in general, but Epidiolex, the drug that was developed by GW Pharma.
Was it only 30 days?
Within
Wow,
30 to 45, I think there is a congressional or a mandate by law that if there is an FDA approval, the DEA has to act within 30 or 90 days, but it was very rapid. And it's mandated. So it's not a matter of if, but shortly after approval. Again, we shouldn't be thinking about MDMA that it's suddenly going to be available everywhere, and the party drug will be sanctioned by the FDA to be taken at any setting. But in the supervised medical setting, just as been shown with MAPS under very strict, in a strict controlled environment.
Now, with MDMA looking like it's probably going to be the first to come through the FDA, do you think that's that's a gift or that's a curse for the companies that are leveraging MDMA and PAT, or do you think it's kind of going to be a learning process? They're going to develop several key learnings and commercialization strategies. And then the guys coming back with DMT, psilocybin, LSD, et cetera, will be able to learn from that and then optimize their business plans on a go-forward basis.
I mean, MAPS and Compass Pathways had a very major role in dialoguing with the FDA on how to design these studies, on what would make it an approvable package. And when the guidance came out, probably about 2 months ago, to draft guidance, and if you looked at the protocol that both MAPS and Compass Pathways are following, they were to the letter. So there was no surprises. So that sort of collaboration and that sort of preparation will lead to lots of learnings. The process through which MAPS is going to go through is going to lead to lessons to be learned. So I don't think it's a curse. I mean, there is always going to have a harbinger ahead of you. And, we will learn to differentiate between psychedelic drugs. I mean, MDMA is not your prototypical psychedelic substance. So there will be differences. But in general, the process of getting through the FDA, the process of descheduling by the DEA is going to be fairly analogous, whether you're looking at DMT, LSD, or psilocybin.
How do you see this playing out as far as institutional interest over the next 6-9 months?
I mean, if you were to tell me 6 months ago that we would have a list, and this list is in the Compass Pathways press release, that Aisling, Vivo, RA Capital, Surveyor Capital, Logos Partners, Partner Funds Management would be listed of buying an up to $285 million stake in Compass.
Think about that.
I would have thought that that's impossible. We got to this based on
data. Is it all based on data?
Draft guidance and clarity on the path forward. And Compass is obviously now financed to commercialization as opposed to hoping for the market to be conducive to financing next year or a year and a half later.
Interesting to say the least. If you had to look at some companies that are like first one out of the gate, as Anthony said, MDMA, are there companies that are focused on that would grab your attention as an analyst to provide coverage on?
I mean, Luminous Wellness is definitely there. and they are closely tied to the success of MAPS in launching the MDMA assisted psychotherapy. So they provide the therapy component. We yet to learn what the economics of the drug cost
Yeah.
and the cost of the therapy, which in the
Yeah.
case of PTSD is relatively involved in terms of preparation, 3 dosing sessions, which could be up to 8 hours each, and in between therapy 3 times. So we yet to find out which one would cost more. But again, and this is coming back to something that we haven't touched on, the preliminary reimbursement code is
Yeah.
in place
Yep.
for that, and the code will distinguish between DMT administration, which is 30 to 45 minutes, versus 8 hours,
Hmm.
6 to 8 hours for MDMA, or 4 to 6 hours for psilocybin. So that's a scalable code. It will get into place by the time, a final code, by the time these companies get to market, as opposed to what happened to Spravato, which
Yeah.
these codes will or were established 1 to 2 years after they arrived, the drug arrived to the market. So there is a tremendous head start here in terms of
Right.
reimbursement, without obviously knowing the minute details of what it is.
What did Johnson and Johnson report revenue wise for Spravato in the last quarter?
I
Was
don't
it over
remember the
100?
exact number, but it will, at this rate, it will annualize to about $1 billion by next year. I think it was the run rate was about 650 or somewhere between 600 and $700 million, which is a
Wow.
tremendous success for a drug that is fairly cumbersome to administer.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to go in for 2 hours twice in the first week. Someone has to take you home. You continue
Hmm.
that for the first month, and then you come in once weekly until you find out whether there is a significant benefit or no response. So,
Yeah.
the whole setup, including reimbursement, just wasn't there at the onset, but it's fully in place now. And this is a lesson to any other pharma company looking from the outside in, that blockbuster potential is possible under the right
Yeah.
setting, i.e., key example is Spravato.
These are
Yep.
big numbers, huh, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean
These are.
they're pretty big numbers, and I mean there's been a number that's been going around the past couple of days in the $12 billion mark. That I think someone was projecting that's what the size of the market, the addressable market of the psychedelics industry. I think growing at a CAGR of around 14% from now until 2035.
Yep.
I mean, looking into that number, what do you believe is compiling that number? I mean, is it drug development? Is it clinics? Is it PAT?
It's
It's as best guess.
Yeah, it's number of
Yeah.
patients. I mean, millions suffer from
Hmm.
treatment-resistant depression. They've tried two, three, four, five different drug regimens, and nothing works. They're still depressed. Millions. And so, if you start treating them at that, most severe setting, and as the USONA Institute said, there is a possibility that we could move closer to the upfront, i.e., you don't have to fail 2 or 3 or 4 drugs before you're treated with a psychedelic. That would
Yeah.
open up a tremendous market potential,
Yeah.
especially with drugs that are scalable. I'm thinking about more of a short-acting drug,
Yeah.
what the combined Cybin slash small pharma would possess with their DMT franchise.
Yeah. 14, I think, million Americans right now been diagnosed with PTSD.
Yep.
And that number's probably a lot higher
Yep.
than what it is when you
Yeah.
think about the education and advancement of the industry where people start to feel comfortable. Um, who knows where this goes, but can you imagine something that has that kind of data and there's zero side effects, and more importantly, it works?
Right. I mean, the reason why this market, the PTSD market, is probably way underestimated because the one or two drugs that we have available are pretty much meaningless. Because
Hmm.
again, patients can't get up to the right dose because of the side effect issues if they respond at all. But half of them don't respond to begin with.
Yeah.
So if you have such limited options, um, patients go undiagnosed. There
Yeah.
is no solution um, other than therapy that you can offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the problem is they're also turning to drugs and alcohol, which is a very bad side effect
Right.
of the whole machine the way it's built right now, treating PTSD as a whole.
And to give you something even worse, I mean, 40 to 50% of these trauma patients also suffer from depression and
Yeah.
anxiety. So it's not a singular something that is related to trauma, but it's a very complicated condition.
So if the data still remains strong that we're seeing with updates from companies, like you've already outlined the list of investors that got involved in the share purchase agreement with Compass. Obviously, as I said off the top, the news last week pertaining to Cybin. So the way you see this playing out, it's already happening now that we're only going to grow when it comes to institutional interest in the imminent future. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and if you look at how undervalued this little sector is, it's
Yeah,
still
good
very
point.
small. When you stack up all the valuations, we are still dealing with probably $1 billion in valuation,
Yeah,
all of it together.
it's
Um,
being generous.
an antidepressant was just launched maybe about 9 months ago by Exome, which is a fairly me too drug. It's a combination of an existing antidepressant with dextromethorphan. That
Yeah,
company is valued at $4 billion, so 4 times the
Yeah,
entire psychedelic sector. So
think about that.
when when things settle, when the market becomes more stable, so there is more risk appetite, which there are certain signs with the significant investment in Compass, the Cybins and the like will tremendously benefit from.
Yeah, I got to ask, like, Steve Cohen cut Maps a $5 million check back in June, if I'm correct, the timeline on that. And then what is it that firm saw in Cybin that the average investor may not be aware of? Because that is a sizable investment, to say the least.
And in addition to the $5 million check to MAPS, I mean the foundation itself that is geared towards psychedelic drug research and development has contributed over $30 million to date, and it's been many years. So I think what they were able to do is examine the landscape. Um, they were probably looking at the Compass deal as well. There are
Yep.
some pluses and minuses with psilocybin, and they may have come. And I haven't talked to them, so I'm just speculating here. They may have come to a conclusion that, especially with after the merger with Small Pharma, there is an IP estate here
yeah,
that is pretty much unassailable, especially when you're dealing with short acting psychedelics. And there is also CYB3 that we were discussing, the psilocybin analog, that may have some potential benefits in terms of administration, the length of the trip, etc., when you compare it to psilocybin proper.
Yep. When we look at this space and how it's operating, a lot of mergers and acquisitions starting to take place where companies that I think are a little bit more cashed up obviously are looking at different IPs within the industry, which pretty much was evidently clear with the Cybin purchase of Small Pharma.
Yep.
So, one, I'd like to get your thoughts on that acquisition, and two, like how much more are we going to see this over the next year? Because we look at, like, for example, Awaken Life Sciences, they've just entered into a phase 3 for alcohol use disorder. And I can't help but think, that's a viable IP that they're working on right now as far as a research trial that is going to be very attractive to other players in the space. But how do you see this kind of playing out when it does come to mergers and acquisitions?
Yep. I think it will come very fast. And the reason being because some of these companies are cash strapped. So
Yeah.
they need to find a solution.
Yeah.
Others are listed on no disrespect in exchanges where it's very difficult for a U.S.
Yeah.
Institutional investor to get involved. Think small pharma. So when I saw the press release, um, I had a thought of what took them so long. Cybins and small pharma's deuterated DMT patent estate is complementary. So at one point in the future, they would have had to reconcile anyhow,
Yeah.
because neither of them may have gotten interest from a pharma company if there is another company that is developing something adjacent, very similar.
Right.
So it just made perfect sense. And most of these companies are single asset companies now. You have at least two different um, uh, 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 portfolio components that you could diversify away from the single asset risk.
100%.
So I foresee similar fates, whether it's Awaken or some of the smaller companies, some of the earlier stage companies. We saw this with obviously with Mindset Pharma,
Yeah.
which was acquired. And so the consolidation will continue. And there is going to be a new crop of companies that will pop up. And you may have featured some of these in the past, some that may want to alter the psychedelic experience. I'm thinking of Delix
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
and to replace those who will be gone by way of an acquisition. So
Yeah.
I see continuous growth in the field.
Yes. For long-term sustainability for the companies that will be around, what do you think for both institutional and retail investors this space presents to them over the next 12 months?
The big milestone is the FDA process for MAPS. That will that's obviously will provide a roadmap. If there are adjustments to be made, again, lessons might be learned if it takes longer than anticipated. Um, More clinical data, and obviously, both Cybin and small pharma is moving on with their
Yeah.
DMT assets. Um, some private companies that are currently under the radar, also in clinical development, both Delix and say Gilgamesh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
a UK-based company, Beckley Psytech. So data, regulatory development, approval, potential descheduling. I mean, what is amazing to me that while I cite the example of CBD, specifically Epidiolex, of how seamless it can be, people are still skeptical about the scheduled nature of these drugs. Even
Hmm.
after they learn that it's a process that the DA has to undertake by mandate
Yeah.
as opposed to a choice, um, but they would still like to see MDMA descheduled and psilocybin descheduled
Yep.
before they feel totally comfortable with them.
Yeah. You brought up MDMA. What happens to MAPS now? You've got compelling data. This is a non-for-profit organization that, in a story with the Wall Street Journal earlier this year, said like they're pretty much cash strapped.
Yeah.
So, if you had to predict, like what happens to this company? Like, do they get more people donating? Is this a company that you could see being an analyst going public? How do you see this playing out?
I mean, the only way for them to continue the journey, so to speak, which has been 30 plus years, since the commercial effort is going to be much more significant than the two phase 3 trials they undertook valiantly, is to access the public markets and
Yeah.
raise probably hundreds of millions of dollars eventually. Because it is going to be, they are going to be in the driving seat as opposed to Numinous or some of the service providers who will
Yeah.
drive this train into the commercial. And you mentioned 14 million patients. I mean, just because you have a drug approved, it doesn't mean those 14 million patients will have access to it or will know
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So it's a significant effort that would
Yeah.
require a significant investment.
If that were to happen, based on the compelling data, and you look at the size of investment dollars that was allocated to Compass that's starting a phase 3, does this potentially be like one of the, if not the biggest, IPOs that the industry has ever experienced, or am I getting ahead of myself there?
I don't know. I mean, there are some risks involved
Yeah.
with the MAPS program. Uh, Not to diminish the fact that they are looking at commercializing MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. The FDA needs to get comfortable with that concept because they're not in the business of approving therapies, they're in the business of approving drugs. Now,
Yeah.
the two are so intertwined here that obviously they've shown the benefit on top
Yeah.
of therapy as a control, that they will probably eventually get comfortable with it. The other consideration is that the MAPS program is fairly um, involved in terms of the therapy component. They have to show ways to scale that up to investors.
Makes sense.
And initially they will get to a certain level, but then they would have to facilitate the building out of that infrastructure, the training
Right.
component, for the drug to be administered properly. And as we know,
Yeah.
there's a huge difference between someone undergoing MDMA treatment versus psilocybin. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very active, involved process between the therapist and the patient during the drug session, as opposed to you are on psilocybin and you are in your own world, whatever that may be, and the therapist
Mhm.
is there to provide you a safe container of support.
Well, good problem to have some of those conversations, because a year, 2 years ago, we didn't know if we were going to have those
Yep.
conversations. But regardless, don't have to say this. Everybody that watches our content understands the excitement pertaining to this industry, but most importantly, just providing a solution and an alternative for people in need. But needless to say, it's a great week over the past
Amazing.
week or so. Actually, the last month,
Yeah.
it's been incredible for this space. You can really start to see the growth. But listen, appreciate the feedback. We should have you on from time to time again, because if we start to see some developments pertaining to this industry, always like to get a analyst's point of view that specializes within this industry, and most importantly, what a lot of institutions are thinking, because when smart money comes in, that's what's really going to captivate our retail audience, which, at the end of the day is, you know, exciting times, to say the least, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's a clear catalyst that at least a month ago went almost completely unnoticed.
Yeah.
But these things will come to light once people have time to digest. Thanks very much, guys.
Yeah. Listen,
Thank you for your time.
appreciate it. Keep in touch. And where are you, in New York?
I'm in New York, yeah.
Yankees fan?
I'm more of a soccer fan, so I have to apologize because
Soccer,
of the
okay.
European background. Sorry.
What's your background?
European. I'm Hungarian by birth.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I got Messi down here in Miami.
I,
It's been it's
I love
been
both.
it's been a gift.
Yeah.
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 I'm sure he's built an economy down in Miami just based off of that, him acquiring.
I mean, he moved. It's funny because everyone's like Inter Miami, Inter Miami. Meanwhile, Messi just moved about 2 miles away from me in Fort Lauderdale, and they play in Fort Lauderdale, up north until the stadium's built, which is going to be 2025. I'm hoping he's still around once the stadium takes shape.
Yeah.
Is Fort Lauderdale turning into like the new Miami? I mean,
everything's getting it's getting built up very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elemer, appreciate the feedback, and please, let's keep in touch. Okay.
Take care, guys.
Take
Take
care.
care. Hey everyone, so how are you surviving these tough market conditions right now? Are there any emerging industries that you want us to cover? Any guests that you want us to interview? Then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to source out. As usual, share this video with your network, smash that like and notification bell, and as usual, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.